On June 11, 1938, Hugh Lord watched his house burn. He set the fire himself. The federal government had bought his land, told him the water was coming regardless, and named a price he could either take or leave. So instead of leaving his garage, the one he had spent years building on the main road between Salt Lake City and Los Angeles, he struck a match, loaded what he could into a rowboat, and pushed off into the rising water of the newly formed Lake Mead. He died believing he was a victim of progress. But today you can walk through the dry foundations of Hugh Lord's garage without getting your boots wet. Not because of a drought, because of a math mistake. In 1922, the federal government made a calculation about the Colorado River that was fundamentally impossible. They built a dam to prove they were right. And they drowned this town in the process. A century later, that same math error is pushing 40 million people toward a catastrophic water crisis. Here is the full story of what happened to St. Thomas and why none of it is over. By the 1920s, St. Thomas was a real town. Around 500 people lived there, with up to 1,500 farming the surrounding valley. It sat on the Arrowhead Trail, the first all-weather road between Salt Lake City and Los Angeles. Hugh Lord's garage kept the cars running. The Gentry Hotel offered beds. There was a post office, a school, a church, and an ice cream parlor. Before St. Thomas, the same valley held Pueblo Grande de Nevada, a lost city of ancestral Puebloan settlements occupied for over 800 years. The government drowned that too. In 1928, President Coolidge signed the legislation authorizing Hoover Dam. The residents of St. Thomas knew immediately what it meant. They lobbied for higher compensation. They lobbied for the town to be spared. They lost both fights. The government did not negotiate. They named a price, told the residents the water was coming regardless, and walked away. That was the full extent of the conversation. Many residents dismantled their own houses before the lake arrived, pulling the timber north rather than surrendering it to the water. Hugh Lord stayed until it came through the door of his garage. He loaded a boat, set the building on fire, and rowed north. 14 days later, the lake closed over the top of the last standing structure. Hugh Lord died in 1947. He was buried in the relocated St. Thomas Cemetery in Overton, Nevada, 9 miles from where his garage now sits dry in the desert. I find that detail hard to shake. In 1869, a one-armed explorer named John Wesley Powell pulled his boats out of the Colorado River right here in the Muddy River Valley. He had just led the first documented expedition through the canyon system. He spent the next 30 years trying to tell Congress that the arid West could not support the scale of settlement being planned. The land was too dry, the water was not there. Congress ignored him, spent 30 years ignoring him to be precise. In 1922, federal representatives from 7 states sat down to divide the Colorado River. What followed was one of the most consequential acts of lazy hydrology in American history. They did not measure the river at Lee Ferry, the official division point between the upper and lower basin. Instead, they used flow data from the Laguna Diversion Dam near Yuma, Arizona, over 600 miles downstream. To get a Lee Ferry figure from that, they estimated the Gila River contribution between the 2 points, assumed evaporation and tributary gains were equal across that entire stretch, and subtracted accordingly. I want you to sit with that for a second. They guessed. 600 miles of river, multiple tributaries, decades of weather variation, and they assumed it all canceled out. From that chain of estimates, they derived a Lee Ferry flow of approximately 16.4 million acre-feet. The United States then divided 16 million acre-feet annually among themselves on the basis of that number. Modern paleohydrology, specifically tree ring reconstruction research conducted at the University of Arizona, proves that the 1920s were the wettest period the Colorado Basin had seen in 5 centuries. The government measured the river during a once-in-500 years anomaly, called it a permanent baseline, and wrote it into federal law. The long-term average annual flow of the Colorado River is around 13 million acre-feet, not 16 million. Then in 1944, the United States signed the Mexican Water Treaty, committing an additional 1.5 million acre-feet annually to Mexico. Total annual commitments now stood at 17.5 million acre-feet against a river that could deliver around 13 million acre-feet. And rising temperatures are now causing the snowpack to sublimate, turning directly to vapor before it ever reaches the river. So the deposits keep shrinking. I want to change how you think about Lake Mead. Stop thinking of it as a lake. Think of it as a bank account. The federal government authorized total annual withdrawals of 17.5 million acre-feet, but the river only deposits around 13 million. Water managers have a name for the gap: structural deficit. For a century, the American West has been writing checks the river cannot cash, using Lake Mead as the overdraft account. And like any overdraft, it was fine right up until it wasn't. St. Thomas sitting dry in the Nevada sun is the physical proof that the account is finally empty. Lake Mead does not operate alone. It survives on releases from Lake Powell, held behind Glen Canyon Dam in the Utah desert. But Powell is living inside the same structural deficit. In February 2026, the Bureau of Reclamation cut its inflow forecast for Lake Powell by another 1.5 million acre-feet. At that rate, Glen Canyon Dam could reach its own minimum power pool, 3,490 feet, as early as December 2026. At that elevation, engineers have documented that vortex action begins at the intake structures, creating whirlpools that pull air into the penstocks and cause mechanical vibration that can destroy turbine equipment. When Powell stops releasing water reliably, Lake Mead's decline becomes mathematically locked. The framework governing who gets cut first is the seniority system of the river: first in time, first in right. The Imperial Irrigation District alone, which uses more Colorado River water than Nevada and Arizona combined, largely to grow alfalfa for export to Saudi Arabia, cuts last, because California was there first. Arizona and Nevada are already in Tier 1 shortage conditions, with deeper Tier 2 cuts projected for 2026. One city adapted. Las Vegas, through the Southern Nevada Water Authority, recycles 99% of its indoor water and built a low-level intake called the Third Straw, designed to keep drawing from the reservoir even at critically low elevations. Las Vegas is the only major city on the Colorado that treated the compact as a warning rather than a guarantee. The rest are still working from the original math. Stop looking at these ruins as a tragedy of the past. Your city's water supply is tied to this bank account, and the bank is about to close the doors. St. Thomas has not been wet since 2012. When you walk through what used to be the town, you are walking on the floor of a lake. The silt is still there, pressed into the surface. The concrete steps from the schoolhouse lead up to nothing. The mortar between the stones of the hotel foundation has partially dissolved, limestone leached away by 6 decades of submersion. The grid of the streets is still readable in the earth. You can see where the lots were, where the fences ran, where Hugh Lord's garage sat at the junction of the main road. The National Park Service manages these ruins as what one ranger called a crime scene of the past. Nothing can be removed. Not a rusted nail, not an old bottle. Everything that tells the story of the town's final days stays exactly where it is. The Bureau of Reclamation's August 2025 24-month study projects Lake Mead's elevation at approximately 1,038 feet by June 2027. That is 2 feet below the 2022 record low. Before it reaches dead pool at 895 feet, it hits minimum power pool at 950 feet, the elevation below which Hoover Dam's turbines stop generating electricity. Approximately 1.3 million people across 3 states lose power before a single tap runs dry. In early 2026, the 7 states sharing the Colorado River were still in unresolved negotiations over post-2026 operating guidelines. No agreement is in place. John Wesley Powell stood in this valley in 1869, and he spent 30 years trying to tell the government it did not have enough water for the West it was building. They ignored him. They measured in the wrong place during an anomaly, built the dam to prove him wrong, and drowned this town, along with 1,000 years of history beneath it, to hold water the river could not consistently provide. The politicians who signed that compact are long gone. They are buried in their own cemeteries now, just like the one they relocated from St. Thomas. They left behind a system built on impossible math and a legal framework that treats a flood that happens once every 500 years as a daily average. That is their legacy. We are currently in a race between two numbers, 950 feet, the point where the turbines at Hoover Dam stop making power, and the date the 7 basin states can finally agree to stop lying to themselves. As of early 2026, there is no agreement. There is only the structural deficit, the falling water line, and the ruins of a town that was sacrificed for a calculation that was never true. If you want to see the future of the American West, do not look at the skyscrapers of Vegas or the farms of California. Look at the mud flats of St. Thomas. Because the water is not just low, it is gone. Leave a comment below. Do you think the 1922 math was a mistake or a deliberate choice to force the growth of the West? I want to know what you think. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more abandonment documentaries from across America.